Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm Executive Director Kathleen Thompson.
And I'm Advocacy Manager Reagan Stone.
We build Progress Texas to tell the truth, to counter intentional disinformation, and to build political power. Here in Texas and nationally, election results show that progressive policies are popular, even if the top Democratic candidates didn't win. Unfortunately, Democratic economic messaging was shouted down by far-right fearmongers who said that America's minorities are out to get what's yours, when the truth is that we have more in common with our neighbors than billionaires and Christian nationalists want us to believe, who are really after your freedom and your finances. In Texas, we've seen the progressive movement win elections, not only getting candidates to Austin or DC, but winning local ballot initiatives like raising the minimum wage, reforming criminal justice, as well as getting big money out of politics.
That's right, Kathleen. Last week, we visited with the organization Ground Game Texas about their Go Figure on-the-ground campaigns that are uniting rural, urban, blue, purple, and red communities across the state on the issues you just mentioned. And this week, we have a dual topic on the pod. One, it's time to take a closer look at the People's House here in Texas. And two, take a dive into our unique position as Texans surrounding a new administration and their coming tariff war with our nation's biggest trade partners. What is going on in Austin and DC? How will the Texas Democratic Party minority promote people first policies? And what can you do to make a stand against a wannabe king and Texas's king-like political donors before it's too late?
Our first guest has risen through the ranks after being first elected to the Texas House in 2012. Before his community sent him to the Pink Dome in Austin, he served as a prosecutor in the Harris County District Attorney's Office, where he sought justice for thousands of crime victims. He's also fought the school-to-prison pipeline and passed comprehensive child protective service reform. This year, he was elected to the Texas House Democratic Caucus to serve as chair, and he's been appointed to the mighty House Appropriations Committee. Welcome back to the show, Representative and Chair Gene Wu.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
And with so much going on surrounding trade and Mexico and everything in between, we brought back the fellow with multiple hats. He's got a cowboy hat on today. You might know him as the Texas Progressive Caucus president, or as I'm introducing, a program associate with the organization Trade Justice. He's a good friend of the pod. Welcome back, Clayton Tucker.
Howdy, y'all. Good being here.
Chair Wu, let's start with you. But before we talk about your new role and this new session, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how you communicate. You said in a recent Texas Tribune interview, you will not suffer fools and that Democrats should be more aggressive. I see you frequently on Twitter, on Reddit. You are a very effective communicator. Would you talk about how you communicate with your constituents online and Texans outside of your district, while some other lawmakers have one Instagram post for an entire session or have no social media presence at all?
No, that's a really good point, and I think the mantra is sort of, we need to stop operating like it's 1990 and start treating our comms and what we do in a different manner. You can't just talk to the newspapers. You can't just talk to the big TV stations and hope that the message gets out. You have to do podcasts. You have to put on videos. You have to put on posts and social media. You simply can't hide in the corner anymore. It doesn't work like that. And voters basically let Democrats know that wasn't working for them because long before 2024, for the past decade, I've been listening to people talk. And I've been listening to our advocates, the Democratic advocates, who say, hey, what are you guys doing? Why aren't you working on this? Why aren't you working on that? And we're like, we have been working on it. We've been going nuts working on it. But the problem is we don't talk about it. We don't talk to people about our victories. We don't tell people about our defeats. We don't tell people when they can jump in and help out. And so people feel like Democrats don't do anything, when in the reality is we do a lot, right? But this is what people believe, and what reality is, sometimes it doesn't matter, because sometimes what people believe is more important to them. And if we're not doing a good job of going out and communicating of what we're doing, what we're fighting for, or what we all should be headed towards, like what kind of future do Democrats bring? If we're not doing it, that's on us, right? But being on us is also our opportunity to fix it. And that's my commitment to fixing it. And when I ran for chair, and is to say, like, look, we're not going to do things the same old way anymore. The answer of why do we do it this way? If the answer is, well, that's the way we've always done it, that's the wrong answer, right? And everything that we're doing now, we should look at it through a lens of, does this help move our message forward? Does this help instill confidence in the population? Does this get us towards our overall goal, right? And talking to people about what is our overall goal, I think that's really huge. And we need to go back to doing the things that Democrats have always done, which is fight for the middle class, which is fight to make sure that the working class people of this country have a country. So, I'm looking forward to it.
My follow-up question, you helped block a MAGA firebrand from becoming the next current Speaker of the Texas House. Democrats and more moderate rural Republicans did lose seats in November's election. We can thank Special Interest Cash for that. Yep. But the opposition party in Austin looks stronger than some people thought. Who's due credit for this achievement? And do you think that Texans are paying attention?
Well, the credit goes to money, right? At the end of the day, if you want to say who takes credit for selling our state piece by piece, giving up our political power, well, the MVP is money, right? Because that's what's taken our state. That's what's taken the entire Republican Party. It's no longer about values. It's no longer about principles. It's about what money wants. And they have bent over backwards to do what money wants time and time again. And the Republicans, if you're seeing aligning themselves with Democrats, right? The people that you see are joining forces. They're not joining forces because they agree with Democrats. They're joining forces because they see the power that is money. They see the power and the evil that it brings. They see what kind of future that money has in store for Texas, how all of us will be we're all just spare parts to them, right? We're all just spare parts to be used up, to be ground down, and to be thrown away when we're no longer productive. Like, who cares if our insurance covers our cancer treatment? Just let them die. Just go get a new worker. And this is what's overtaking our state. And this is what Democrats and Republicans are joining up together to fight. This idea that we only serve here at the whim, at the pleasure of the billionaires. And I'm tired of it, and they're tired of it. But if you want to know who the real champion is right now, it's money. And if we want to fight against it, our voices have to be louder than the money.
One more question about the start of session. All of our staff members came from West Texas, East Texas, North Texas, and converged in Austin with you all. And we're in a sea of red shirts that said, axe Democratic chairs, ban Democratic chairs, no Democratic chairs. And I've been going to opening day session for, I can't even remember how long. And it felt really bad, honestly, that somebody behind me in line said, she sounds vaccinated. I don't know if they're talking about me or another Democrat, and Kyle Rittenhouse was at the door, but those folks didn't win that fight on opening day. So can you speak a little bit about the House Speaker race and about how it came to be that they didn't win the day?
Yeah, so look, I mean, the ultra right-wing extremists have been trying to push the state over a cliff for the better part of a decade now. Their very worst inclinations have been held in check by Democrats. It's basically us that's keeping them from enacting all the terrible stuff that they want, the stuff that would blow the state up in 5 minutes. Democrats have been blocking them, and now Democrats have been fully pushed out of the way. And so now is a coalition. It can't just be Democrats anymore. Now it's a coalition of sensible Republicans and Democrats who basically say, no, we want to work on things that actually move the state forward. We're not interested in those like red meat issues that just divide people, just bring hate and division. And like, What does a trans person playing in sports have to do with your wages? What does this book in this library have to do with the fact that you can't afford health insurance anymore? What does DEI have to do with the fact that, like you can't get insurance for your house? Nothing. It has absolutely nothing to do with it, and it never will. But you know what? Those issues help keep the people with money in power. They help distract everyone else. They keep everyone else on the bottom divided. When we're fighting over these petty little issues, we're fighting over stuff that has nothing to do with how we live on a day-to-day basis. When we're fighting about stuff that they tell us to fight over, then we don't fight about the big stuff that actually matters to us, like wages, like our jobs, like the future of the state, like the power grid, like everything else, right? Stuff that they make money off of. That's what I want us to do, not just Democrats, but everybody, Texans across the board, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, I don't give a shit, right? I want everybody to get together and start talking about, hey, what does this have to do with wages? What does this have to do with whether my children have a future? What does this have to do whether like my kids can afford to go to college? Nothing. And if it doesn't have anything to do with those things, tell them to put it away. Tell them to focus on real things that matter to everyday people. At the end of the day, I think what most people want is they want a future, right? Most people, if you just ask them what do they really want out of life, they want a decent future for themselves and for their families. That's all we want. And how we get there, I don't think we're that far apart. If you ask people, hey, do you want your kids to go to college? Most people say, yeah, hell yeah, I want my kids to go to college. Do you want them to go to college the way you did with very reasonable tuition and then they can come out of college with very little debt or no debt at all? Do you want that? Or do you want them to come out with like $300,000 of debt? Well, I know what I would choose. Why would conservatives be any different? And so I think what we need to do is instead of when we get focused on these red meat issues that they want us to focus on, let's always go back to, hey, but like, great, trans people in sports, like all 60 of them who might play in sports in America across the United States right now, that's fantastic. What does that have to do with your wages, right? Like, tell me how that fixes with the problems that you've been having at home for the past 5-10 years. Tell me how that gets you a promotion. Tell me how that makes sure that your kids have a real future. And if it doesn't, stop.
That's exactly right. And Clayton, as I mentioned at the top, you wear a lot of hats, but today you're also wearing the organizational hat of trade justice. Can you tell us a little bit about your mission with them and ultimately how it plays into some of the surprises or maybe not so surprising theater Trump has been messing with this month? And I'm talking tariffs.
Yeah, it's been an interesting month or lifetime, whatever it happens to be since the inauguration. So basically about trade justice, we are, to put it very simply, we are for a just and sustainable global economy because international trade has become basically a get out of jail free card for a lot of these corporations. Oh, they don't like something, international trade undoes it. Oh, they don't like this regulation. They don't want to have to pay their workers a living wage. They would rather just sell out entire industries, use international trade. They can get around all those pesky labor laws and human rights laws and other climate regulations. So we focus on a number of things. A big one is going to be, of course, tariffs. We've been definitely looking a lot about that. But then you have like USMCA, that's NAFTA 2.0. Funny enough about that, it's USMCA, i.e. NAFTA 2.0, is something that Trump negotiated, and now he's calling it a terrible deal. So that's kind of funny. But with all these tariffs, I mean, we're definitely we're keeping a close eye, and we can definitely dive into what makes a good tariff and what makes, for lack of better words, a stupid tariff.
Yes, and we're going to get to that. And as Chair Wu was noting earlier, a lot of this reminded me of not just the 90s and NAFTA, but the 1880s, right? Our progressive movement started back then when robber barons and oligarchs, much like today, were being exposed by the working classes at the time. And I hope to link these conversations together because there's a lot going on. Decades later, this led to FDR proposing additional rights, like a right to a good job or the right to a comfortable retirement. Some of these were passed legislatively by future President LBJ's War on Poverty. This history, it's not only thought-provoking, but also, in my opinion, it's leading our country heart forward. It's inspiring to many. And Chair Wu, in your personal view, how does this play into the American dream? And is there a potential for a coming renaissance of this progressive movement here in Texas?
What scares me is the Republicans are out there very gleefully talking about how this is going to be the Roaring '20s without having read the rest of the book to realize that it's the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression that's coming. And I think the thing that scares me is that we are set up to mirror exactly what happened 100 years ago, right? You go look up the causes of the Great Depression in the 1920s. It's massive wealth inequity, a government that is untrusted by the people, cutting the government, slashing entitlement programs and other support programs, a loss of security around this nation, and of course, tariffs, a global trade war, right? And so we're just like step by step heading right back. But look, I'm scared of what is to come. I mean, we're not even a month in, and we're already at this place. Right? There's already nationwide protests. I think in 3 months, those protests probably will be more intense than George Floyd's protests. And I don't know what's going to happen. But the one thing, I don't know why, but I feel okay about it, right? I feel hopeful about it because I think for the first time, I see the American people waking up to this idea that they have to take charge of their own country. Because, and I've said this time and time again, the greatest enemy of democracy is not Donald Trump. It's apathy. It's when people think that nothing I do matters. If I vote, don't vote. If I vote for this person over that person, it's all the same. It doesn't matter, and then they just quietly give up and they stop paying attention and they just say, whatever happens, happens. And we've done that for probably 3 decades now. And voter participation, everything's gone down, down, down. And people are less driven by actual policies, and now they make their decisions based on a podcast, some celebrity endorsement, something, right? And it's just insane. And for too long, Americans have this idea that, there are no consequences. Well, 2025 is going to be a year of consequences for everybody, right? And I think I'm hopeful that once Americans start to realize that life does have consequences, that they will take ownership of their own country and saying, okay, it's time to retake the reins. It's time to let the people take back control of this country. Let's pull this back from the billionaires before it's too late, right? Before there is no country to be had, because that's the ultimate objective, is to remake our entire nation in their image. And we'll just be split up piece by piece. We'll have Bezos land and Musk land and everywhere else. And they'll have their own little fiefdom with their own little governments. I know that sounds kind of insane, but would you put it past them to not do it? Right? You don't think that they would form their own little governments, their own little countries, and own little kingdoms if they could? Musk and them basically have decided that they are no longer a part of our social contract because they're so rich. They have their own private armies, private medical care, private food. Hell, Zuckerberg and others, they have their own private islands, like complete islands that they own by themselves, that they don't need to be a part of our social contract, right? And they're doing everything they can to break themselves from it. And even if that means breaking all of our social contracts with each other along the way, they don't care, right? They're just here to get as much of their stuff away from us as possible. But I'm hopeful because for the first time in a long time, people are talking about it in that way. People are talking about they're finally seeing hey, the billionaires, a promise that they would look after the working class people. Oh, they didn't really care. They just told you things so they can get power. And now that they have power, they're just dumping you by the side, right? And there's going to be some communities, people, Muslim Americans who voted for Trump, LGBTQ who voted for Trump, Asians who voted for Trump, who are going to have a very rude awakening. But I think what we should be doing is when they awaken, we should be right there next to their bed and go, okay, you ready to join the resistance? Let's go, right? Everybody out there, every single day, there's people waking up. Every single day, let's go catch them. Every single one, bring them in. Are you ready to join the resistance? Are you ready to fight? Because now as opposed to 2024. Now this is truly an uphill battle. The people that we are opposing, the billionaires, the technocrats, the Silicon Valley bros, right? They are now fully in power. They have the maximum amount of power that they can ever have, other short of being elected into office. And we're not just fighting their money now. Now we're fighting their money backed up by the power of the government. So this is an all hands on deck, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, not just independents, but every single man, woman, and child. If you give a crap about this country, you better get off your ass now, right? And because it is being sold from underneath your feet, piece by piece, and they're not even being shy about it.
Here at the Halfway Point, a quick thanks for listening to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. If this is your first visit, welcome, and be sure to subscribe or follow for our quick daily update on the most important stories for progressives in Texas to be following. The Progress Texas Daily Dispatch hits this feed every weekday morning by about 8:30 Central and brings you up to speed in less than 10 minutes. Also, do hit our web store at progresstexas.org to grab the merch to match your progressive values. Union printed t-shirts, including Revolution, Y'all Means All, and our most popular Humans Against Ted Cruz t-shirts, and lots more at the web store, progresstexas.org. Thanks again for listening.
Rep. Wu, you've said this session that you don't plan to carry any bills outside of ceremonial resolutions. Tell us, if you're not working on legislative priorities, what you'll be working on for the remainder of this regular session and special sessions that could possibly come.
Sure. My personal legislative priorities will be the legislative priorities of Democrats, which will be everything that we can do to either block or push legislation that helps the middle class, that helps working class Texans, that makes college cheaper, that makes health and care affordable, that puts money back into our schools, that pays teachers, that reduces insurance costs, right? Anything that does those things. Republicans want to work on water systems, fine. Absolutely, it's work on water system because that helps working class Texans make sure that they have a future to live for, right? Let's do those things. And all the things that have nothing to do with moving people forward, all those things that promote hate, that cause division, I'm going to tell them to knock it off. I'm going to tell them go F off and tell them like either you work on the stuff that people care about or you need to go out there and tell the people why you don't care about their issues, you know? And that's it. And I think everybody, no matter if you're progressive or conservative or whatever you are, the only question you should be asking your elected officials is, are you moving us forward? Not like, are you beating up on these people? Are you restricting those groups' rights? But what are you doing to make my life better, right? And that's got to be the question. Let's be selfish. Let's be greedy. Let's worry about ourselves and let's worry about ourselves. I'm going to worry about my kids. I'm going to worry about whether or not they have a good college to go to. I'm going to worry about whether or not they can afford to live once they leave college. I'm going to worry about whether they can have a good job in their future, right? Let's be selfish and worry about our families, worry about each other, and worry about our lives. And if the legislature is working on anything, I don't care if it's a DNR, if they're working on anything that does not move you forward or move some group of people forward in the state, tell them to knock it off. That's it.
I really appreciate your candidness, Representative Wu. Clayton, I'm going to switch over to you, and we're giving our podcast listeners today a good right brain and left brain stimulation here, coming back in between conversations. But before the previous federal administration left office, there were scheduled calls with the U.S. International Trade Commission. I remember having a conversation with you about that to gain insight into what Americans value in trade agreements as we near the future renegotiations of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, as you said before. And as you also said correctly, that's kind of the NAFTA 2.0. Clayton, first, real quick, yes or no, are those calls still on?
They are not, and they got canceled 24 hours before the next meeting. So with I'm just going to use the acronym USITC, they were holding all these scheduled meetings where you could talk about how does international trade affect rural poverty, urban poverty, gender, race, climate, a whole bunch of other things. And they were even having in-person meetings. And it sounds like, I know the virtual ones got all canceled, but it sounds like the in-person ones probably got canceled too. completely out of the blue.
And so what are you hearing from experts on the matter that we need to know to bring to the forefront of these conversations, even if it's for future administrations post-Trump?
I mean, right now, the best thing to do is just communicate with your congressperson and communicate with other people who represent you and the government. Really just let them know that you want good trade deals. That also the government should be listening to us. They should be getting our feedback. Because look, I mean, this isn't rocket science. It's not hard to listen to people. It, honest to God, is not a challenge to do so. I know some in government find it very challenging, but it's really not. So we really just need to keep pushing and keep advocating that, no, there should be these listening sessions. This isn't rocket science. Let the people talk. Listen to them before we get into any sort of negotiations, because if they're not listening to us, they're definitely going to be listening to the big corporations.
Yeah, and I want to note, if any listeners do need a quick explainer on the tariff issue, U.S. Representative Greg Casar had a really good explainer on his social media, and we do encourage you to check it out. Clayton, do you have anything to add to that? Just noting that this is kind of rapid fire as this tariff war is kind of heating up.
Yeah, any resource from the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who Representative Casar chairs, is always a good resource. The way I like to put it, I use an analogy of eating a steak as comparing to eating a soup. A tariff is like a steak knife. Now, if you're trying to eat a soup with a steak knife, it's really not going to help you. And that's like us putting tariffs on Mexico and Canada, just pure retaliatory that has nothing to do with anything. While if you're eating a steak, yes, you need a steak knife, incredibly important, but you also need a fork. If you don't really want to eat a steak with only a steak knife. And that fork would be industrial policy. That would be like what we saw with Biden's administration's, the CHIPS Act, bringing semiconductor manufacturing back to the United States. Wonderful policy, in addition with tariffs. Also, the Bipartisan Induction Inflation Act that would bring back other industries. Another really easy way to think about it, if you are taking a tariff and you're applying it to an entire country, it is probably not a good tariff. Where if you take a tariff and you apply it to an individual corporation, particularly one that's abusing its workers, that's burning down a forest, that is removing indigenous communities, that is polluting its environment, that's basically just not living up to the standards set by international rules, yeah, those companies should be tariffed so we can correct that bad behavior.
Where it's actually used well, unfortunately, by Trump, is like China, like the government subsidizes its steel and like solar panel production so that they can get their costs below what the market would actually support. And so they can sell them at a loss and take over more of the market. And so when they come over here, the U.S. slaps a tariff on them to sort of like balance out the idea that their government helped drive down their costs, right? That's a proper way to use a tariff because you're just evening the playing field. Yeah. Whereas the ones here are just, they make no sense. But like with people that we trade with basically no conditions. Like we have free trade between the United States and Canada and Mexico. I mean, for the most part, because it's just easier because they're our neighbors and we trust them and we trust them not to screw us and they trust us not to screw them. There's absolutely no reason to do tariffs. Just like there's like the whole mass deportation. I mean, this is going back to the whole thing where conservatives think that they don't need immigrants in this country and they don't need other countries for us to survive. And it's like, this is 2025, right? Most people with reasonable sensibilities realize, hey, without immigrants, our country grinds to a halt really fast. And without our neighboring countries, we will lose a lot of the wealth that we've built up because it's trade with them directly that helps us. What you're seeing in real time is people effing around and finding out. And people are learning out what find out means on a real-time basis because there's like people were told, hey, if you do these tariffs, other countries only react one way, and they're like, no, they won't do that. It's like, oh, okay, they did exactly that, right? And if you do mass deportation of immigrants, we told you food production was shut down the first day, and nobody believed us. And then 65% of farm workers didn't show up, and now eggs are $9 a box, $11 a box, $12 a box, if you can even find them. right?
And going further into the food issue, we import about 50% of our fruits and veggies from Mexico. So if you think food is expensive now, oh, just you wait. If that trade war starts, Mexico's going to hit us with retaliatory tariffs or to stop exports altogether in some industries. And you're talking a minimum of 25% increase on food prices at a minimum. And that will really hurt the pocketbooks of the American workers.
Yeah. No, and even looking at trade. I mean, looking at trade stuff, looking at all the stuff that Trump has done in regards to labor. I mean, I don't. If there's anybody who's labor who votes for Trump or votes for Republicans in the future, seriously, I mean, everything that they have said has been a lie, right? And they've done all the terrible things that. I mean, there's not going to be an NLRB soon. Trump's going to find some way to basically defund it, and if not, I'm sure the Republican Congress will find some way to get rid of it. It's mind-boggling that like what we're dealing with now is just like going up to people and saying, "Told you." The exact thing that we said would happen happened, and somehow people like still didn't believe it. But whatever.
While we're talking about federal issues and state issues, something that both Rep. Wu and you, Clayton, are talking about is about contacting your elected officials. I'm sure listeners, all of you, have your two senators' phone numbers in your phone like me, right? So if you don't, it's easy to find their contact information, and they need to hear from you. The Republicans need to hear from you, and Democrats need to hear from you to get the support from their districts about these economic issues and about ignoring the bullshit that isn't going to move us forward, like Rep. Wu is saying. Yep. So I've had phone numbers saved for my elected officials for years, and I really traded up from some Republicans when I lived in Tarrant County to now having Rep. Vinton Jones in the House and Senator West. And then now Jasmine Crockett in D.C. I've really traded up, but I call them as well. I call them and encourage them and share what policies are going to impact my family of 5, and what policies directly impact my 3 kids. So I'm hearing from both of you. Make sure you're contacting your elected officials. Don't be shy. Advocate for yourself, like Rep. Wu was saying. And Rep. Wu, you've been out front on voting rights. Specifically, you helped hold a press conference with the Harris County delegation surrounding Governor Abbott's big to-do about kicking folks off the voter rolls. There's still questions around those actions from last summer and their legality. What do you see at the forefront of voting rights this session? And Progress Texas and a Progress Texas Institute has been working with the Legal Defense Fund and Common Cause on state voting rights reform. Would you speak a little bit about free and fair elections?
So, I mean, there's literally never a session where voting rights are not in jeopardy in Texas, simply because the people who are in charge are not stupid. They know, right? They see the demographics. They see the extra, like the hiccups that Trump is causing. But even outside of those, they can see the demographics. They can see the different changes. And one thing that they can see is Republicans really aren't making a lot of headway into building their coalition. Their voting base is dying. Right? Their voting base is old and white and dying. And there's some Latinos, some Asians who are going over, but not nearly enough to make up for the difference. And so the only way that they're going to survive in the coming days is to make sure the other side doesn't vote. And how do you do that? Well, you don't do it by just blocking people off, and that would be too easy to stop in court. And so what they do is they put up little roadblocks that may only knock off like 0.1% of a population here, a 0.2% of a population there. But when you start adding up all those points and point zeros, they're going to start adding up the whole numbers. And a lot of those races, I mean, 2018, Cruz barely scraped by with 2.5 points. 2.5 points is nothing, right? There's lots of races, state rep seats, state senate seats that are won by just a few hundred votes. And it happens over and over again. There's seats in Harris County out of like 2 million votes. It came down to a few hundred. And that's what they're going for. And anytime they're in power and they have the ability to twist the rules just a little bit more, they're going to do it. What does it look like this time? I don't know. but it's going to be something where it looks very benign and looks very subtle, but it'll have a very disparate impact on poor communities and minority communities, I promise. It's always the way it looks.
And round two in our little lightning Jeopardy, it's not a quiz, Chair Wu, but a very popular policy right now, cannabis decriminalization. It's in the party platform. Do you see any movement noting that Republican Lieutenant Governor Patrick loves attacking Texans' personal freedoms?
It's weird. I mean, look, we don't really even need to decriminalize cannabis anymore. Like the hemp-based THC, it's the same thing. And frankly, a lot of the stores are just selling cannabis as is. So the real key for Texans is protect what you have. THC from hemp is legal, and let's keep it that way. Look, if you're not into politics, but this thing moves you, get your ass up and get it involved, right? This is one of those issues where I don't know why the Republicans are taking this on, because it will only generate hate for you. Even people who are not into politics like their THC. They like just being able to go home and relax. I'll tell you one big thing I think people should be supporting the THC ban. Well, one piece of data I've seen is that the binge drinking in America has dropped off a cliff, right? Huh. So overconsumption of alcohol has fallen off a cliff in the United States in the past 10 years. You think about what that means. If we can reduce the number of DWI fatalities, if we can reduce the number of liver transplants needed, kidney failures, heart failures, and all this other stuff because people are not drinking as much alcohol, that can have some real long-lasting benefits for our country and in terms of our pocketbooks as well. And I just think it's absolutely mind-boggling that they would just wage this war against something that people love. But I'm encouraging them to.
Okay, and third in our round here, lots of news surrounding Abbott's private school voucher scam. As it currently stands, SB2 would give families that make up to $150,000 up to $10,000 of taxpayer funds, which of course is more than the public school student allotment.
That's insane.
It is insane. With this issue, how can our audience help you fight this bad public policy?
I'll say this again and again. This voucher issue is not going to be run by Republicans or Democrats. It's going to be won by the people, right? This is one of those fundamental issues. The Democrats and Republicans care about the politics of it. But the people out there, people who are watching this, you should be caring about the justice of it, about the morality of it. Is it moral to take money from all of us and give it to rich people? Give it to people making $150,000, people who can spend $40,000 a year on putting their kids in a private school. Is that morally right to take from the poor and give to the rich? Is that right? If it's not right, then do something. Call, email, write, show up, whatever it is. Don't just sit there, right? This is what they've counted on. The billionaires have spent all this time telling you that it doesn't matter who you vote for, it's all the same, and nothing ever changes. So there's no point. So just sit at home and just whimper in your chair. And when they push through things like this, and let's not be shy about this. This is going through because 4 billionaires decided that they want to rewrite America, right? They want to re-envision America in their own image. And this is a part of it. Part of these Christian nationalists is that they believe that public education is the cause of their problems. That if everyone was homeschooled, they went to religious private schools, we would not having these problems. Women would not be fighting for their right to vote. Black people and minorities would not be fighting for their civil rights if we just had proper education, right? So they see the dismantling of a public school system as their long-term goal, and they're accomplishing it. If you think that's bullshit, do something. It's not going to be the politicians who change this. It's going to be you.
Such a good point to get out. And I know my own generation, whether that's millennials or Gen X or especially Gen Z, we got to learn how to pick up that phone and make phone calls too. Clayton, this is the last question for you today, but I want you to kind of sum us up. Where can we learn more about your work? Any topics that you want to expand on, and does any of that, as we kind of tie back to Austin as well?
Sure. So I really appreciate y'all's time this afternoon. So there's a couple really great resources. One would, of course, be the Trade Justice Education Fund. So that would be tradejusticeedfund.org. There's also one of our sister organizations, Citizens Trade Campaign. They have a lot of really good resources. If you want to learn about some more niche trade issues, there is Closed de minimis loophole. And that's kind of the sign of the times. Actually, literally during the recording of this podcast, we had a major trade update on de minimis shipments. Apparently, the president has changed his executive order. So that's fun. It's a fun time working in trade policy right now. Can't even go through one podcast without something changing. And lastly, if you're interested in critical minerals, there's critical mineral justice. Trade is a very big and complicated issue, but if you just go to the Trade Justice Education Fund, it will become a little bit simpler.
And Representative Wu, anything you wanted to cover that we missed today?
All I want is for people out there to not be disheartened. In fact, I would say, if anything, this is the time to act. This is the time to go. I mean, right now, what you're seeing out there is the beginning of what was Nazi Germany, right? And we kind of joke around about that. We kind of like saying in passing, but like you can see for yourself right now that this is what's happening. Institutions that protect us, protect our civil rights, defend each other, are being torn apart. Things that do good in our country are being shredded, right? And they're setting it up so they can do whatever they want. This is your time to act. If you ever said like, hey, Americans should have done more when these things happened, people in Germany should have stood up, people around the world should have stood up, great. It's your turn. It's now our time. You know, I grew up, my heroes when I grew up were with the civil rights leaders, were Gandhi and MLK and all those people. And I watched them in fascination saying like, I wish I could have been on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I wanted to, you know, be in those marches and stand up and do all the things that those people had done. And so we'll never have those opportunities. We'll never get to have those fights. We'll never be able to live in that kind of glory and of memory and on the importance. And I'm wrong. We are completely in those times. Those times are now. This is the time for people to be heroes. This is the time for people to be leaders. This is the time for people to stand up and saying, I believe in America, but it doesn't look like this.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Gene Wu, not only for your humility, but for your true leadership right now in these times. I also want to thank Clayton Tucker, Program Associate with Trade Justice, with joining us with one of his hats today in that role. And of course, Kathleen Thompson, Progress Texas Executive Director, for co-hosting today. We have learned so much today, and I know in a time like rapid fire that we are in right now, I just want to stress to everyone to take care of yourselves and your loved ones and your health as well. And listeners, here at Progress Texas, you know us, we're in the business of countering the conservative disinformation machine. But while that machine is funded by oil billionaires, tech puppet masters, religious right-wing groups, and more, we rely mostly on everyday Texans who value our hard work and share our belief that a Texas that works for everybody is the Texas we want to live in. We don't do subscriptions or paywalls because we believe the message of Progress is one that everyone should be able to access, learn from, and act upon. So if you've become a regular listener, we could use your support, and no amount is too small. Thanks to Wayne Owens, Susan Rodriguez, and Kelly Craven Sharp for joining the team as monthly contributors. I also want to note Clayton Tucker is also a monthly contributor as well. Thank you very much. You can join all of them. Go to progresstexas.org/donate. And with that, from everyone at Progress Texas, thank you for listening and for all you do to press progress forward here in the Lone Star State. We'll see you next time.